So the problem that isn't a problem that we're going to fix now is to make our API slower, because it's too fast, it's not realistic. And what we're going to use for this is we're going to use a package to help us display loading indicators, and one that also provides a service that we can use to turn on and turn off the loading indicators. So we'll head back to VS Code. I'm just going to clean up all of these open tabs. And what we'll do is we'll come back into our terminal, the one we're using for installing stuff, and we need to go up to our client level for this to install packages. And what we're going to use is something called ngx-spinner. And if we take a look at this one, this is on version 10. It's always kept pretty up to date, very popular, 51,000 weekly downloads. And they also have recently added the ng-add command, which means our configuration for this is pretty straightforward. So what we need to do is use ng-add ngx-spinner, and this is going to configure all of this for us. So let's go ahead, copy this command, or just type it in directly because it's not that big a deal, and press return. And that failed. That's quite disappointing. But what it's telling us here, this particular error, is it cannot find a module that it needs. And it needs the Angular, and this stands for the Component Development Kit, and it needs something from this. So what we need to get around this particular error is we need to install into our application the Angular CDK. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll need to say npm install, and then we need to say @angular /CDK and press return. And that was successful. Let's now rerun the ng-add ngx-spinner so that we actually get this installed and configured. And this is installed successfully, and it's made an update to our app module. So let's go and take a look and see what it added to our app module. And we can see here it's added an import for the ngx-spinner module. Okay, that's fine. I'm not going to move it into our shared module. I'm just going to leave it in place just so we can move forward. But you could move this into the shared module. Just don't forget to export it if you do. So what we'll do is we're going to create a service to help us out here. So we're going to cd into the source, the app, and underscore services. And what we're going to do is create a new service. So we're going to say nggs, and we're going to call this service busy, and we're going to skip -tests and press return. And let's go and take a look at what we need to do inside this service. So I'm just going to open it up, and what we're going to do inside here is we're going to add a property, and we're going to say busy request count, and we're going to set it equal to 0 initially. We could have multiple requests going on at a time, so we're going to increment this counter and decrement this counter each time we make a request and a request completes. And what we need to add to our constructor is inject the spinner service that we get from ngx-spinner. So we'll call it spinner service, and we get this from ngx-spinner service. And what we'll do in here is we'll just add a couple of methods. We'll add a method called busy, and we'll say list.busyRequestCount ++ to increment it, and then we'll say list.spinnerService.show, and we'll specify undefined because we're not going to give each spinner a name, and then we can add some configuration properties for this. And we've got lots of different options. There's about 50 different spinner types, and if you don't like the spinner I'm using, then feel free to go to the documentation and take a look at the demo site, and you can see lots of different spinner options. I'm going to go for line-scale-party as the spinner that we'll use. And I'm going to give it some coloring, so we need the background color so that it doesn't dim our page too much. We're going to give it a color, and we're going to say RGBA, and add parentheses, and we're going to say 255, 255, 255, and then 0, so that we don't dim our background, we just display the spinner itself, and we'll give the spinner a color, and we're going to make it dark gray, so we'll use #33333 3. And that's what we're going to show when we're busy. And when we're idle, we'll add another method for this. And we'll say list.busyRequestCount minus minus. And we'll check to see what our current busy request count is. And if it's less than or equal to 0, then we're going to say list.busyRequestCount equals 0. And we're going to say list.spinnerService.hide. Just in case our busy service gets a little bit confused about what number of requests have been completed, if it's less than 0, then we're just going to set it to 0. Otherwise, if it does manage to get itself into a -1, then next time we make a request, it's all going to get a bit confused. So that's just a safety mechanism. It's probably not going to go -1, but just in case. So what do we do next? How do we engage this spinner service? Well, luckily, we've got a facility in Angular to intercept requests as they go in and they go out. And we can use an interceptor to take care of this. So what we'll do, we'll go back to our terminal. And we'll cd upper level, and we'll cd into our interceptors, and we'll create a new interceptor. So we'll say ngg, and we'll say interceptor, and we're going to call this one loading, and we're going to skip -tests, and press return. And this goes ahead and creates our new interceptor. So we'll open up the loading interceptor. And what we want to do inside here is inject our busy service. So we're going to say private busy service, and we'll bring in our busy service. And the first thing we're going to do, when we're about to send our request, we're going to call the list.busyService.busy method. And then what we're going to do, once the request comes back, we know it's completed, so we can turn off our busy spinner. So what we'll do is we'll use the pipe inside here, and the first thing we want to do is add a fake delay. Our application is way too fast. So what we'll do is we'll say delay, and this is an RxJS operator, so make sure we get it in from RxJS. VS Code is behaving very well for these recordings for me, but I appreciate VS Code is not perfect, so if it's not perfect, I remind you once again, the first troubleshooting step is to quit and then reload it again. But VS Code is being very well behaved. I probably shouldn't have said that because it probably heard me and will start to misbehave. So the next thing we need is to use a finalize in this case. Again, another RxJS operator. And this gives us an opportunity to do something when things have completed. So we'll use the finalize, and this takes a method. And we can say inside here that we want to set the busy service to idle. And what we also need to do, because this is an interceptor, we need to go to our app module and add this inside there. So inside the app module, what we'll do is we'll just copy this line down, and we'll say use class, and we'll say loading interceptor, and we don't need the extra comma. And we've got one more task, is we need to add the spinner component into our application. Now we want this to be visible from anywhere, so what we're going to use for this is we're going to go up to our root component templates, and what we'll do, it doesn't really matter where we put this, by the way, because it's going to take over the view of on our browser. But I'm just going to add it at the top, and I'm going to use the ngx-spinner, and inside here what we can also do is add some text, and I'm going to say loading ... And now what we should find is that we have loading indicators, and let's go take a look. If we go and refresh let's go back to matches, and we can see that we've got loading going on there. If we refresh the page, we can see our spinner. If we go to other parts of our app, we don't see the loading, but when we go back to our matches, we do. And if we go to a user, then we see the loading indicator. If we go back to our matches, we see a loading indicator. And hopefully you're starting to think, really? Surely we don't have to load the users every single time we click on a link. That's not very good. And you're right. You're absolutely right. It's something that we're going to take a look at in the next lesson. and that's where we store our data. And we'll take a look at that next.